Hello, my name is Janaea Prayer, and today I will be doing a movie review for The Pursuit of Happyness. The Pursuit of Happyness is a true story about a single parent named Chris Gardner and his son Christopher, and it shows them going through a hardship in their life after they're evicted from their apartment and they're left with nowhere else to go. Chris does everything he can to provide them with a roof over their heads, but that becomes difficult when his main job is a non-paying internship at a firm, and he has a side job of selling medical scanners at the hospitals, but that does not help most of the time. They bounce back and forth between motels and shelters for months, and the whole time Chris is doing everything that he can to get a better life for him and his son, no matter what it takes. And eventually at the end of the movie, Chris is the intern chosen to be promoted to the paying job as a broker, and spoiler alert, he became a really successful stockbroker and ended up opening up his own firm in San Francisco. Now this movie relates to the HDF 110 content because we see a lot of the major content in this movie. Starting with Suzanne Farr's framework, her overall idea is that the dominant group maintains its power through institutional power and economic power. For institutional power, that's where we have the government, religious, and educational institutions. We see institutional power in the movie when Chris and his wife are stressed over paying the bills because they're already months behind and they're close to losing their apartment. Both of their jobs are not sufficient enough to pay the bills on time, so eventually his wife leaves Chris and their son to go to New York, and that leaves Chris to care for his son alone, and he just has the job of the scanners at that time, and it was not going well. Eventually they are evicted from their apartment because they do not have any access to government funding like welfare programs, and there is a point where Chris was able to sell a scanner, so he had enough to get a hotel for him and his son, and they lived off that check for a while. But unfortunately the bank saw that he had money in his account, so they collected his back taxes, and that only left him with $23 in his name. And it's the fact that the government was able to just take his money without letting Chris know shows how much power they have, because they were aware of Chris and his situation, and they know how he doesn't have another way to pay the bills. Again, this shows how the dominant group stays in control because they have access to more resources and higher paying jobs, whereas a minority group may struggle daily with little to no resources. Continuing on with Farr's framework, economic power is where there is limited access, and it also promotes the myth of scarcity. We see this in the film when Chris is limited to government funds and resources like the shelters that are all around the city. And obviously because he's a male, he cannot get into the women and children's shelters, which are all over the city, and there's only one men's shelter, so he has to leave work, pick up his son, and rush to the men's shelter to get in line before 5 o'clock to even get a bed, and he barely makes it there every day. And this is the fact that there's only one male shelter in the whole city, so like I said, limited resources. Now moving forward, the next major HDF 110 content we see throughout the whole film is poverty. Poverty in the US is determined by the poverty threshold, and that is used to measure the number of people who do not have enough income to meet the basic needs. So throughout the whole movie we witness Chris Gardner mostly not having sufficient funds to meet these basic needs, and he couldn't provide shelter or food for himself and his son, and they often wore the same clothes every day, and when they got the bed in the shelter they just washed their clothes in the sink. So as we come to the end of this video, it is important that it is known that The Pursuit of Happyness is based off a true story, and it shines light on members of the minority group, and it shows how hard it can be for a minority, and in this case a male person of color, to live in America when the dominant group remains in power, and it looks as if they're not coming down anytime soon. So thank you for listening.